Hey everyone, back again. It's been a while since I did my last review and install. Right now today I've got a couple of Graflexes vintages that I'm going to be showing off. One's in the A New Hope configuration, one is in the Empire Strikes Back configuration. Both feature different chassis. The A New Hope has the Goth 3D master chassis. The Empire Strikes Back has the Martin Beyer chassis. Part of it is 3D plastic, part of it is the 3D printed metal. So I'm going to show those off in a little bit. I figure I would go over top to bottom showing these off because these are both all vintage Graflexes, which I spent a lot of time and funding on to make that happen. I kind of wanted to go over all that and show that off for anybody that's interested in trying to do an all vintage themselves. So the chassis that's in the A New Hope is the same exact chassis that was in my Graflex replica from the Graflex shop that I got a couple months back that I did a review on. I had ended up selling off that shell, so I just kept the chassis and put it in this vintage here, so it's pretty much the same as before. Haven't really done anything different with it. I'm just going to kind of show that off in comparison with the Martin Beyer chassis. The A New Hope configuration, I guess we'll start with this guy first. Again, this is all vintage, and I even retained some of the bulb assembly, some of the metal pieces in here. I had to cut them down in order to get them to fit inside the Solos Hold blade holder, but I did get them to fit in there, so that's quite nice. I got the Exactra 20 bubble strip. I'll go over that in just a minute. And then these grips are vintage grips from Kal Fett. He got these from I think they were like cabinet shelving, the cabinet inserts, the rails, I believe. So what he ended up finding was he found a whole bunch of rolls of these guys and sold them on, I believe, on the Facebook pages, and as well as I think even on the RPF. They originally were brown, and he originally was just selling them plain, and then eventually started selling them in sets, finished, cut, and notched. So I ended up buying two sets. I still have a raw set of brown, and then I ended up getting a finished set here. One obviously for the New Hope and the other one for the Empire Strikes Back. These guys are fantastic. They are a little bit different than Roy's grips. Roy from Wanawanga has pretty much got the dimensions pretty much nailed down from all of his specs and research that he's done. I have that on my previous build. I had those. They're fantastic grips. They are very similar, but they are slightly different. These vintage ones compared to Roy's. So again, like, you know, the fact that they're vintage, I think, is great. Do you need that? No, but again, if you're going for an all vintage Graflex, you're going to try and source these parts as best as you possibly can. You know, they're not going to be the exact ones that were used on the prop back in the day, but they're still vintage. So to me, I feel like that still counts. So as you can see, this is a 3-cell Graflex Corp. This does not have the patent on it. I actually ended up getting this after I had finished my Empire Strikes Back, so I couldn't switch the tubes. Well, I guess I could have, but I didn't really feel like taking off all the grips and everything and switching all that out, because this is also a Folmer, but this actually has the patent on the bottom, which I'll show that when I show off the kobold. But this does have the long pins here. The only thing I haven't done yet is I have not put on the D-ring, as you can see, and the reason why, I will show that right now, is I have a vintage D-ring and I have a vintage clip that came with the Graflex bag, but unfortunately this clip doesn't really sit too flush. And if you look at, now this is Roy's again from Wanawanga, this is his clip that comes with his D-ring. They're situated a little differently. This has a nice flat surface to go up against the pommel, and it's got this nice little beveled piece right here that allows the D-ring to move freely, and of course the holes match up. That's not like that on this vintage clip here, and as you can see, I've kind of mangled it quite a bit. I've got a few others that I can use in its place. I'm just kind of trying to test this out right now to align everything up. So that's the only thing I haven't put on it yet, because I'm still trying to get a good way of doing it. I've been looking around and I haven't seen anything yet, but I'm still checking that out. And at some point in time I will get to it. I have a vintage rivet to go with it, so that eventually will get on there. But for now it's pretty much complete. The Empire one. Alright, so I've got, again, the grips are from Kal. The screws are all from Exactra calculators. 2 are from a 20, 2 are from a 21, 2 are from a 22. They are all the same size and length on those calculators. This strip right here is an Otis clamp card from an Otis elevator. Now again, depending on who you talk to, did the clamp card come from an Otis elevator? Did it come from an HP 44 circuit board? I think that's been debated quite a bit in the forums. This one looks very, very close. I was lucky to get this from MARV on the RPF. He hooked me up with this, so I was very happy to get that. It is very close. You know, some of them, the gold fingers look great. Some of the silver solder as it comes up are not 100% straight, and it is a little bit thicker. But to me, I think that looks fantastic. And again, the fact that it's vintage from a 70s elevator card, I was pretty happy with that. Again, you have 2 vintage red buttons, the vintage kobold, and if you can see, depending on the lighting, you'll see this does have the patent number on it. Now this is a vintage D-ring that could be associated with Empire Strikes Back. That is a proper sizing. I want to thank Carter Hopkins for that, because he hooked me up from the Graflex Addict page. That was a big help. These rivets are also vintage rivets. This is from Panaflex, also from the RPF. I cannot recommend going to the Graflex Addicts support page enough if you are looking to build, whether it's a vintage, a replica, or even a Corbanth 2.1 or 2.5, whatever he's up to now. Those guys are they're a wealth of knowledge. Some really helpful people there that will help you complete your hilt, depending on what you're looking for, going after certain parts, and kind of can steer you pretty much in the right direction. I know they helped me out quite a bit, both when I was doing my first build, which was a Corbanth 2.1, and then as well as these vintage Graflexes, because these are quite expensive and you don't want to screw it up, so you gotta take your time with everything. These both have the smooth long pins, so in order to show off the chassis, I am going to have to remove those when I pull the chassis out, so I'm going to save that until the very, very end. And both also have the vintage bolt assembly. I kept those. Now again, if you have the Solos hold blade holder, it comes with the little piece to hold it in there to make a blade plug out of the vintage assembly piece, which I really like a lot, keeping that, trying to keep that, again, that vintage feel for it. You know, I did think about just making these static. I'm actually starting to get more of a feeling for making some static hilts rather than just doing all FX. So I may eventually do a complete Empire Strikes Back static vintage. I may just kind of like pull everything out of here and I have another bulb assembly I could always just throw back in. But for right now I'm going to leave it as an FX. I still like the appeal of the FX, but as of right now I can't just sit up on a shelf and be static. So, you know, I can have the best of both worlds for right now. But with that, the specs inside, they're both carrying a Prizm 5.1, 18650 3.7 lithium-ion battery. A New Hope configuration is a blue, green, and white tri-cree, where my Empire Strikes Back is a blue, blue, amber. And I have to say, the amber Flesh on Clash is fantastic. I think that looks great. It really stands out, and I think you'll see that when I show off the blade in a little bit. The only thing on here, now everything part of the hilt itself is vintage, but this tape, the foil tape, this is also from Wanawanga, from Roy. Now, I don't think that's vintage. I think those, I don't know how old his rolls are that he has from that. I thought I read somewhere on one of the pages, the Facebook pages, that there were people that did have some like vintage foil tape. I don't know I can't obviously remember where that was from. I didn't get that from that source, but for right now that's okay. I debated putting that on because I really do like looking at the Graflex logo, and that's something that I might just end up taking off at some point in time, just kind of to complete this build. For the look that I was going for, I wanted to put the tape on for right now, but that's something I might just take off at some point. So, with that, I want to go over the chassis. Now, the only other thing before I get to that, so the bubble strip here, if you can see this card, the card itself is much thinner than if you were to, is not as wide as the cards from, if you get them from, if you source them from Roy, or if you're getting them from when Corbanth sends out his bubble strips. These, when you get them off the calculator, and I'll show off the card, they're longer. This was probably longer by about, I don't know, about half an inch maybe, about like on both sides, and it's thick, so it doesn't really fit inside the rails. So what you end up having to do is, of course, you have to shave this down just so that it matches up with the clamp itself, but then you have to really shave down the side here, and you have to be very, very careful that you don't scratch the hell out of the back. That's something where I've really been taking my time, and when it sits in here, it sits in it pretty well, and the clamp is held on pretty tight, but as you can see, there's definitely a little bit of space on either side. I'm not really sure if that is like that on all the vintages, people that are using the Exactra bubble strip or not. I actually haven't really played around with that too much, but I don't know how much tighter I can get that clamp band anyway, so to me, I feel like it sits nice. It's not moving anywhere, it's pretty tight. The only thing is, whenever I go to open up the clamp here, like this thing will pretty much just slide out, so I kind of just take it off just so I don't damage it. So, now the funny thing is, when I took this chassis out of my replica from the Graflex shop, and it was the V1, this thing slid pretty well in and out of that shell, even with the bottom 3-cell tube. But when I put it into the vintage, it actually, it didn't fit as well. For some reason, I know the vintages have, some of them have different measurements for whatever the case may be. You know, whether that, you know, tenths or hundredths of a millimeter off, whatever the case may be, but it was making it tighter to fit the chassis on. So I really had to go to town in shaving down the chassis. And I wanted to just show that, because other people might experience the same thing. Now, as you can see here, like, I really shaved this down, the metal here. Like, these strips used to go all the way across, but I had to shave this all the way down in order to get the bottom 3-cell to fit. Even the little trap for the SD card, and then even around the 28mm speaker in here. For my chassis, I opted to go with the metal cap as the kill key, the rotating kill key. There is a flap that goes over here. This was a I think another 3D printed piece that connected into this and would cover the recharge port, and then you could just have a real small kill key that went underneath it, that hit under there. But I actually liked the cap, so I kind of kept it. I actually really liked the design. This was, you know, before the Martin Beyer chassis was really the craze. You know, the Goth 3D chassis, the Master chassis, was fantastic. Most of this is in metal. There is some plastic here by the speaker, and then when I take the chassis out, you'll see up by the SD card as well. That is, I'm sorry, not the SD card, the sound card itself. Up there as well, there's some 3D printed plastic. There are 2 crystals in here. One is a 5mm white LED, the other one is a 5mm blue LED, again to match up with the blade and also the flash on clash. So I will even show off the Empire one. Like I said, I'll save showing off the chassis until the very end, just because of how I have to do the pins, so this way I'll show off the blade a little bit first and get that done. Alright. And the same thing here. Now this thing slid out real nice. this one, there's not really a problem. Again, I put a 3mm LED in here, red LED. Really enjoyed that actually. Did a little mesh right on the inside, so this hovers right over the soundboard. So it connects really easily, and I just like that look when it powers on. So that's connected to the power for the power indicator. Really enjoy these slide kill keys, kill switches. Those are fantastic. And then there's the I believe it's a 1.3mm recharge port as opposed to the 2.1. So when you do build these, and I feel like a lot of the chassis now I'm starting to see calling for a 1.3 rather than the 2.1. You do have to get a little adapter, of course, for your the charger itself, because most of them are just the standard 2.1mm. This chassis was one of the hardest. It was the hardest chassis I've had to put together. There are a lot of pieces to this. You need to take your time. You can get very creative. That was one of the great thing about Martin is he put this guide together, and there are different ways to really work the crystal chamber, and I'll show that off in just a minute, that I actually really liked, and it was just a very creative way of doing this. Now I know that Goth's chassis, he's actually redoing his Metal Master. I think he just did like a 2.0 version, and then I believe he came out with some type of there was another like master variation that he did that looked kind of similar to the Martin Beyer chassis. Again, I think it even had like a rotating crystal in it, which that's a pretty cool idea, having like a little motor in there. But obviously I did not do that one. That's one that he's done more recently, that he's put that out in the last few months. So with all that, I figured let's do a little So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to take these guys out. Now the one thing I had to do for blade retention is you get these extra pieces. I'm going to show these off. So if this can focus here. On the red button, Solo's Hold came out with this extra metallic piece that you could purchase. And it acted as like an increased surface area to kind of grip the blade holder. The only problem is it goes through the blade holder, but doesn't really hit anything. It doesn't hit the blade itself or the blade plug. So what I ended up doing was putting this little rubber nub that's a self-adhesive on the back of it and then shaved it down. And then that kind of really works very well to catch both the blade and the blade plug itself. And then you have here, this was printed off from East Coast Sabers, off of his little Shapeways shop that he has. This is just a 3D plastic piece that gives, again, a little bit more surface area and extension to the glass eye. It is still shine through, so you can still have that feature. I believe also there was one for a non-shine through, so if you wanted to do that, you could do it as well. Obviously the shine through is not on screen, just a really cool look. So you can pretty much have it either way. Now the blade plugs, for anyone who's had to make, for these chassis, if you wanted to stick with the vintage, you'd have to make your own, especially if you're keeping the assembly. So Solo's Hold sends you that silver container right in there, that silver piece, and that contains, and then you have to put the spring as well as the bulb assembly as part of it inside, okay, and then that maintains the proper function of the bulb piece. But making these was a little bit of a pain. I had never really made a blade before, or my own blade plug, so I mean it's not that difficult. You know, once you just buy the stock, put it all together, and then you just have to shave it down. The shaving part of it was just the real struggle of this whole thing, and just frustrating because you're literally standing and you have to keep rechecking as it slides in and out. For a while, like it was catching up, you know, it would go in halfway and then the top portion would catch, so you had to keep sanding towards the top portion, and then eventually it goes in. But that was probably like one thing that was a little frustrating towards the end, because you're just about finished and you're trying to work these guys in. It just took a little while, but take your time, measure everything out so that you're cutting the appropriate size, and eventually everything will work out for you. Alright, so with that, I will throw a blade in. I'm going to show it off real quick just on both, just the colors, just to show the difference off, and then I'll show off the chassis to finish everything up. Alright, so I'm just going to throw the blade in here. Alright, I'm just going to turn the lights down.
Your father wanted you to have this when you were old enough. Your father's lightsaber. This is the weapon of a Jedi Knight.
Okay, now this is the blue and the green mixed together for that really nice, like an Arctic blue, a little bit more screen accurate for the A New Hope. I really like the color of this quite a bit. And then if you did my little slide switch, okay, it's going to pick up maybe just a little bit. Alright. So, that's the A New Hope. And let's get Empire going. Now here is the Empire Strikes Back. Again, this is a blue amber. Really like how that contrasts the blue. Very nicely. Alright, now what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take a little Graflex tool. I'm going to take the pins off. Now this video is going to be a little bit longer probably than I would have liked, but at least I'll get to show these off. The one thing I miss that I actually did on my the Graflex shop replica is that I actually did a clamp activation. I gotta tell you, I really do enjoy that. I do miss that a little bit with this, as much as I really like the red button and the slide switch. There is something to me about having that clamp activation that I do miss, that I have on like the Corbin 2.1. Okay, so actually this is a Prizm V5, not a 5.1. So as you can see, it's the same blade holders. Okay, but you can see here on the master chassis from Goth. So this here, I used a little slide switch. Okay, so again, if I get this going. I use that. So you can see most of this here is 3D printed, whereas where the crystal chamber here is, this is all metal. Alright? And now, for the Martin Beyer one, the one thing I really like here, this protects and hides all the wires as well as the slide switch over here. Now I ended up using a regular momentary switch here instead of the, let's see here, that I have. This one with the arm on top, so they're slightly different. The slide switch really wasn't accurate or functioning as well when I was installing it on this. I had a second one, so I just switched it out and just went with a typical another momentary switch, and it ended up being just fine. I sat it a little bit higher, and it works out pretty well. And then, as you can see here, again, I like how this covers all the wires. This here, I just tied it, I used some heat shrink, and then I just used some E6000 to hold the wires down so everything stayed in place and nothing really moves. But the Martin Beyer chassis is just, it's a little more intricate. I like how it's metal here up against the blade holder. To me, I think that makes it a little bit stronger. This is, I think, the phase gate that they have it. So I have a little 3mm blue LED sitting in here that when it turns on, you can see that kind of goes in there. And then again, you can see the white flashlight glass happen there. Now, I'm going to say one thing. With this here, the biggest pain, these small little tubes. I think these were like 1mm or 1.5mm. These are very, very small brass rods that have to go in. And there are pre-cut holes throughout the whole chassis, whether it's not just the plastic, but also the metal as well. And you have to make sure that you take a very small drill bit. I actually had to go and buy on Amazon the precision drill bits to match to get through those slots so that everything's clean. Because even when everything's printed out, not all the plastic, not all the metal, the holes themselves are kind of like refilled back in. So you have to go in there and clean that out. Otherwise you're going to end up having debris in there, and when you try to push the tubes through, they're so small and pliable that they just start bending, and you'll start ruining some of the brass rods. So just make sure you clean that out first. I didn't have as much of an issue on that with the Goth 3D chassis. The rods are a little bit bigger on this one, so they're a little bit thicker, they're a little bit stronger. The ones on the Martin Beyer chassis definitely bent a little bit more. Most of this stuff I was able to purchase on either eBay or on Amazon. Some of the nuts and the tubing, the brass rods, and some of the hollow rods that you have to purchase, I couldn't get everything on Amazon, so I ended up having to pick this up on eBay. So if anyone's having trouble finding some of this stuff, when I went to go buy it, I think off Martin Beyer's site, he actually sells like kits depending on which chassis you end up buying, or which one, or which I think which chassis you end up buying, whether it was the Metal Master or like a combination of. So you can get all that stuff from him directly if the kits are available, but they weren't at the time that I did, so I just kind of started shopping around. But what I started doing is I did mess up some of my brass rods, so what I did was I just took them and threw them in here, and I just started trying to get somewhat creative. I mean, not crazy, but all the ones that were like short, the leftover pieces, I just threw them in there, just to give it a little extra look. But overall, this is definitely one of the most challenging chassis I've had to put together to date. There's the great thing about both these chassis is these guys put together great instruction manuals. Martin Beyer put one together, as well as Goth. Rick Rilo has his own. He usually does like a video as well as a step-by-step on all of his chassis. So just if this is like one of your first chassis that you're building, one of the first hilts that you're putting together, just follow them step by step, go slow, read it through multiple times, make sure you have the right supplies. That'll make things go a lot smoother. Overall, I did enjoy some of this stuff. Sometimes I did feel like I was going crazy with some of the small details putting this in, but I did really enjoy it a lot. I went with some of some of the cheaper metals in here that I tried to use. Now I've seen some people before that do like a liquid rubber through here to close off any light that can shine back through, which does happen. And the same thing even in here. Mine, again, there are wires that are in between here, that are sitting in between. You really want to make sure that you're doing the appropriate like wiring, twisting, and all that, just to make sure everything gets down nice and tight. A lot of the tubes in here are hollow, so that the wires are traveling through. That's why you don't see any wires traveling through the crystal chamber. It was very brilliantly designed, I have to say, to hide all the wires in this. But again, just making sure that you're cutting everything to length too much wire, it's going to bunch somewhere. It might even prevent you from closing things all the way. And some of the metal might, the way that it's printed also, might not allow you to close things all the way, so you might need to sand in certain places. So just be aware of that. That did happen with me a few times. With the battery, I didn't do the contacts. I think on Martin Beyer, he's got those like the battery contacts here, if you were using that. Mine's a JST, so I had to sand down the base of where the battery sits. It made a nice little channel, so this sat pretty well. And then I just slid the, I cut the wires for the JST and then wired it to the recharge port, going through the top side of the chassis. So yeah, this was really a lot of fun, challenging. I was happy that I did it. To this date, the hardest chassis that I had to do before this was the Solos Hold Master chassis from Goth for the V2, and that there was a lot. Again, there was a lot of pieces to that. A very well designed chassis. That took me a while to put everything together. So when I was tackling this, all I kept hearing about was it's definitely the most challenging by quite a few of the builders that were out there. But just take your time. You'll definitely be able to work it all out. The only thing that's somewhat frustrating, and I know that now Solos Hold is, they just redesigned their blade holder. The blade holder is great. It really, really is. The only thing that you're going to see is if you utilize this, is that in between here, you see that little slit? So this front half, this lip, stays in using the screw. This doesn't really go anywhere, and it just pulls out from that section there. But there's light that's created through that section there. That can sometimes be, if you don't want that look, that can be a little irritating. Even if you get this thing as close as possible, there's still a little bit of light that can shine through. I think their new design that they're putting out might prevent that or make it a lot less noticeable than what it is now. It looks great, the new blade holder that they designed. And I'm sure that's going to be quite a big hit once everyone starts getting those in. I'll be interested in watching some videos on people designing them, or utilizing them and installing them. But I mean, for the most part, that's, it's a fantastic blade holder. I mean, I don't think anyone else has really put together a 7/8 blade holder that can utilize all the original parts the way that Solos Hold did. So I mean, I know the Graflex shop has a 1-inch one. I don't have any experience with that, and most of the people that I see using on the videos are using Solos Hold's 7/8 blade holder. So I know a lot of people were happy that they came back out with them, as well as designing a new one. But I do really like, there's definitely plus and minuses with both the Martin Beyer chassis as well as the Goth 3D chassis. It's kind of pretty much your pick on aesthetics and what you're going for. I mean, I really do like both. After putting together the Martin Beyer one, I think I appreciated it more because of how much time it took. So definitely look over the designs, watch people's videos, look at if there's any types of either comparisons that you want to do out there. Talk to people, hit the forums, because you want to get as much information as you possibly can before investing in something like this. Vintages obviously are not cheap, and neither are the chassis. The chassis get quite expensive, especially if you're doing a Martin Beyer Metal Master. That alone is going to set you back at least $4 and change, even for some of the cheaper metals that you can purchase. So take your time with all that stuff. I've really enjoyed doing these. I now have a Graflex for each of the 3 styles that we've seen. So I'm going to get myself a nice little tier stand for that, for the one for A New Hope, the Empire Strikes Back, and then I ended up changing out my Corband 2.1. When I originally did it, the video you can watch, that I did it in Empire Strikes Back, but since I got the Vintage, I ended up changing it over to The Force Awakens, which obviously is not that hard. So actually, I did bring it out. So we sanded that down there, just different clamp card. I do have the rivets through here. The Corband 2.1, I went all out as possibly as I could to get all the accuracies. Obviously everyone knows the inaccuracies that Corband had, so I tried to fix that and to get it as accurate as I possibly could to what a replica would look like. it came out pretty good, and that's the only one to me that's you can actually duel with because of the blade holder design. These vintages are not made for that. These are going to sit on a shelf and just kind of be stared at, take them out when people are interested in them or want to hear about Star Wars. But other than that, these guys are, you should not duel the vintage. If you don't know that already, I'm sure most of the people that are watching this do, but if you don't, the clamp is the only thing that really holds these two pieces together. So, you know, a couple of light swings maybe, but as soon as you go to do any type of contact, you're going to regret that very fast. It's very expensive. There's no need to duel with a vintage. You know, as always, guys, I've been doing this for a couple of years now. I'm very happy with all the subscribers that I've been getting. I try to answer all the questions that I get on the videos that I've put out. So if you guys do have questions, by all means, throw something out there. I'd love to answer you guys and go back and forth. It's always fun. You know, that's really about it. I've got my first NeoPixel coming up, an MHS build. And then I'm going to be working on the Ezra lightsaber from season 3 and 4. That's the Solos Hold Rebel Orphan. I can't wait to show that one off. I already have it. I didn't do a review of the hilt itself, like a reveal. I'll figure I'll just do all that when I actually complete the install. But I already have the chassis from Goth. I got the Metal Master. You know, I keep saying Metal Master. I got the Master chassis. So I look forward to putting all that together. That's just going to be a tri-cree. That will not be a NeoPixel. I've only done that just for the MHS build, and I'm going to see how that goes. I'm just about done with that. It's using a Teensy, so it's my first Teensy build. I'll have a lot to say about that when that time comes. But you know, I think I've talked long enough for this build, for this video. Again, thank you guys very much for watching, and hope you guys enjoy the rest of your day.